People weren't getting out, they were dying. And one day somebody would be there, then the next day they were gone.
And then, of course, some of them didn't make it, especially if they were 20 and 19, and you felt so bad about them. Yeah. There were quite a few in those days that didn't make it.
You could hear a lot of people coughing and coughing, and I'm sure there was a lot of people there who were very ill.
On Boxing Day that year, 6 of my friends came down from Regina, three couples. And 3 of them came into the pavilion to see me, but 3 of them did not. And when I asked why not, their parents had said they mustn't go in because of this terrible TB, this consumption.
August or September of 1923. My mother, well, she just had to go in and say goodbye to her friend. They hugged and kissed each other, and who knew about TB, how badly and quickly it could be spread. They had an idea, but nobody was sure. 10 months later in June, my mother passed away. That's how contagious it was.
I was 17, 1929, Fort San. Lots of memories. Nothing but memories now. I'm Ernest Handy. I had TB in the old days, before there was any medicine against tuberculosis, when lots of people died from TB. Lots of people.
Lil Howley, Parklands, Alberta. J.P. Tompkins, Ernfold.
I guess I went to the TB clinic, and inside of a week, I was at Fort San and put to bed, strict bed, and spent a couple of years. They said 6 months to a year they thought would. That was a kind way of letting me down.
Funny thing about a place like this, it's as much in people's memories as anywhere, so you'll hear their voices. Guaranteed.
Mrs. L. Gleason, Maccoon. Johnny Perez, Wilkie.
In the early part of 1937, I wasn't feeling well and went to the doctor. The doctors told me I had a hole in one of my lungs about the size of a 50-cent piece, and the start of a spread of the other lung.
J.L. Horn.
Yeah, there were never any empty beds.
Vernon Hunt, Wolseley. Althea Parker, Regina.
In 1917, Fort San was a brand new facility with the latest in scientific advances. The microscope, the X-ray, the stethoscope. Still, Dr. Ferguson had his work cut out for him. Those days, the only hope was to catch TB early. It was an epidemic. Contagious, no cure. The #1 killer in the world. People had to learn the signs and get to the doctor. And the doctors had to learn too. No pill, no potion could control TB back then. Just rest and fresh air. The San became a whole new world for us patients. Back then, if a person had to travel, it took some doing. I'd see more of the nurses and the other patients than my own family. July 18th, Thursday. Weather still warm. It's pretty quiet now. Just Lindholm down the hall playing his guitar. Strandberg was moved to the infirmary. Something went wrong in his stomach. Another stretcher case took his place.
My sister was 3 years old at the time. I was 6 and my brother was 9. And there was a rope about 20 feet from where my mother was laying. And My sister was 3 years old and she couldn't understand why she couldn't go and hug her mother and all that. We wouldn't let her. We had to hang on to her. We knew that we weren't supposed to. We understood because our father had explained it to us and the doctor had explained it to us too. But can you imagine how you explain to a 3-year-old kid? It's pretty tough to explain. She was in the hallway, my mother was in the hallway, and the hallway was full of people coughing and hacking and bringing phlegm up, you know, and it was just, you can't believe if you see about 15 or 20 people in this big hallway, the windows wide open, the air blowing in and coughing and I remember our mother asking us 3 kids if we'd go and climb this hill. But we came in there and Mother said, gee, that she had seen us, you know, and she knew that she'd never see us again.
Mrs. Sophie Zeman, age 28, 3 children ages 3, 6, and 9, treated 183 days. Mrs. Isabelle Lafleur, age 36, treated 663 days. 7 children at home, ages 1 through 14. Mrs. Olga Franco, age 22, treated 65 days. 1 child, 1 year old.
July 19th, Friday. Rained some today. Got pictures from home. The nurse let me take a tub bath for a change, but it took some persuading. It's kinda against the rules, as I'm a bed patient. Strandberg was operated on.
It was devastating. It was devastating for my mother and dad, the only boy in the family, and an illness that you felt that you cannot recover. In Fort San, he stayed there until 35. In 35, he came out. He was out for about 4 years. When he went back in again, his TB once again had come back. And from there on, the balance of the years, he was in and out of the sanatorium. He was 12 years old when he came down with TB. He passed away, he was into his 29th year. When he thought he was making a headway, all of a sudden he would break down again.
July 20th. Weather hot again. It's clouding and lightning some, too. Strandberg died this morning. But Fort San never felt like a hospital, more like a home. To Dr. Ferguson, the medical superintendent, a good home gave you all you needed: physical, emotional, spiritual. That spelled health to him as much as anything he learned in medical school. The home atmosphere at Fort San gave us patients the edge to fight TB.
You rubbed their backs and you rubbed their feet and you fixed their hair. Sometimes you put the makeup on. You did everything. You fixed their nails just to make them happy. And they were.
That's the staff. Dr. Ferguson was in charge. Dr. Boughton took care of the Saskatoon San when it opened a few years later. And the nurses. The nurses worked 12 hours a day, 6 days a week for $25 a month. They did everything for us. Some never married. The sand became their world, just like it was for us patients. I remember the nurses. 17 years old, you remember the nurses.
If you worked in the infirmary, you were on at 7 o'clock. And if you were a junior, your first duty was to take a whole tray to 40 patients. Hot boiling water. And when you came up the stairs, if you said good morning to someone, they'd never hear you. Everybody was coughing. And they had sputum boxes, you know. And everybody coughed and coughed and coughed. And the hot water was the thing that finally toned them down so they could have their breakfast. You changed the sputum boxes. How you did it was you took the sputum box, had a clip, and the top came up, and when you emptied them, you had sawdust in a bucket, and you put sawdust in, lifted it up, and it came out. And you had a container disposal. It was quite a chore. I didn't like it, but I did it.
There were kind old souls like Alf, our orderly, and Mr. Stiff, the undertaker. He was no ghoul. It's just that somebody had to take care of our dead. We had enough of them. Dr. Ferguson was in charge from when Fort San opened in 1917 until 1948 when he retired. That's almost 31 years. The time of the rest cure was Dr. Ferguson's time as well. He gave the SAN its #1 rule. The patient's needs come first.
Initial stages, people came there with advanced tuberculosis and they were very sick. And many of them died. And so often, when they were in the process of dying, my father would go and sit with them. And if they wanted him to read the Bible, he would do that. Or he'd just sit and talk if they wanted to, or just sit.
Rest was the cure. So we rested. Some could read in bed or do crafts in bed. Some had to lie down all the time, even for meals. We were only supposed to get out of bed if the doctor gave us a few minutes of exercise. Mostly, we rested. Everybody chased cure. That meant we rested completely. For 2 hours every morning and 2 hours every afternoon. In our beds, out on the balconies. No chatting, no reading, no radio, no worrying, no nothing. Except chasing cure. Absolute rest in the fresh Canadian prairie air. And when those of us on strict bed rest finished each round of chasing cure, we rested some more.
They didn't have bathroom privileges, not just their strict bed patients, hundreds of them, some of them for years.
Except sometimes, like with Frank. Supposed to be strictly bed, but up so much, the nurses finally took his pajamas away from him. Figured he wouldn't likely run around naked. But it wasn't long before he was up again. A sheet wrapped around him like some Roman in a toga. I was catching heck from the nurses.
Rest cure meant doing absolutely nothing. One of the no-nos was you never put your arms above your head. You know, that was putting a strain on the lungs as it does on the heart as well. And you didn't reach for anything. You really lay very, very still. And you weren't even supposed to read, which meant holding a book. But we would get over on our sides and we would get the books in and spend a little time. But it was mostly just radio and talking and Nothing exciting.
And at 8:30, they were pulled out on the balcony, 40 below zero, it didn't matter. And they had blankets and a toque and socks, and they had what they call pigs. They were sort of pottery stuff where you put a hot water, and you put a jacket on them, you stuffed it into the bed. And if you were on night duty, you changed the pigs at 2 o'clock in the morning, and you nearly froze to death. But the patients were nice and warm.
We'd never get people to go to bed the way we did. Flat on your back for all those months and years. And if you just did, and everybody was in the same boat.
On my balcony were farmers, salesmen, lawyers, boys my own age and younger, Ukrainians, natives, Scotsmen, and French, all in our pajamas. No privacy, no privilege. Everyone was equal in the world of TB recovery. TB was an embarrassment, a sign of weakness, but it was a great equalizer. We patients were isolated, but in many ways, TB brought us together too.
People, different backgrounds, different views, and the dictum, of course, in those days, as it so often is, you should never talk religion or politics. Well, of course we did. As soon as we got out in the balcony at night, we got talking about religion and politics, and learned a lot about what farming was like in the dirty 30s, and other ways of life by this assortment of people. And to me, that was really worthwhile.
I was only married one on our balcony, and the rest were all young. But we had a great rapport between us. There were 8 of us, and we just had a great time together. In fact, I have 2 friends today who were on the balcony when I was there.
The world was a different place then. You hardly ever called the doctor. Unpasteurized milk and uninspected meat gave kids TB of the bone. Public health was just starting out. Everybody had to learn about TB, how it was spread, the signs, what to do. After the sands were built, public education about TB was number 1, because TB was the number 1 cause of death. Whole families were admitted. The mother in one pavilion, the father in another, the children here or there.
March of '39, I guess, that it was discovered I had TB. I got a report that I had 4+ tuberculosis and both lungs were affected. And he said, "You go to the SAM next week." And I said, "No, I won't. I've got a family of 2 daughters and my wife, and I can't afford to keep the house, so we've got to make other arrangements." So I said, "I'll go at the end of the month."
The doctors said that the least treatment would be a year, and at that particular time that Ken went into the infirmary, there was a little hope for him there for a little while.
And then Ruth had been infected, and of course with the kids to worry about and everything, and economically it wasn't too good. And she didn't overcome the infection, and it finally decided she had to go to the SAN and have bed rest to make it, and that's what happened. I moved into the Y to live, and a friend of ours who happened to be a railroader's wife and had a pass took our children down to their grandmother in Leamington, Ontario.
That was a very hard part, saying goodbye to the children.
Age at death, 10 years. Mary Fox, age at death, 14. Larry Stone, age at death, 10 months. Paul Chartier, age at death, 6. Mary Turner, age at death, 10 years. Howard Roberts, age at death, 13 months. Gabrielle Brugetti, age at death, 4 years, 11 months, 9 days.
The IODE built the Children's Pavilion for kids with TB, and the Preventorium, too.
Oh, the Preventorium, that was quite a place. They phoned up, they had a new baby, so I'd have to go in. They were born to tuberculous mothers and immediately removed to the Preventorium. And you used to take them to visit Mama, but Mama was over there and here was your baby. You see? It's kind of sad. Just the same. They never developed tuberculosis.
We had lots of entertainment to help us pass the time. The San Orchestra would play in the band shell on the front lawn. And I remember the Sousa Orchestra, too.
Everything from the Regina Choir to the symphony, to the soloists, to the quartets, to the bands. They'd play in front of the infirmary where there was a bandstand. But that was just for the infirmary patients. But the two pavilions, the three, they were able to come out and sit on the lawn. But then they went back and played on the west side. They played out on the lawn. And my husband played for many years, like in the infirmary and in bandstand, jazz. Oh, got all kinds of requests, and they sent letters down. He was very good looking. And the girls sent letters down. They'd no idea he was my husband, you see.
We had Halloween parties for children and grown-ups, too. At the yearly picnic, bed patients and patients in casts for TB of the bone were wheeled down to the lake for one day in the out of doors. Year-round, the patients did crafts like beading and crocheting. They wrote poetry and songs for the Valley Echo, the Sand magazine.
Climbing to the sky, rolling plains,
Even Slim Wilson, the singing cowboy on the radio, came out to the Sand every Sunday from 1937 to 1940 to sing at the bedside of each bed patient.
In 1937, I went on CJRM for $10 a week every morning, early morning. And that's when I started to go really big in those days. There was nothing but radio. The patients of Fort San would write me, and I'd go out and visit them on a Sunday when I wasn't on the radio. I'd go out to Fort San. And the next week I'd go to Saskatoon San, and the week after I'd go to Prince Albert San. And you'll never forget it. I played at a lot of places. I played for a lot of people. But the look on those kids' faces or the patients there, you just couldn't buy it. All the beds were full. I'd start at one bed. After the rest period, I'd play it, sing them a song. Then the next bed, I'd give them a picture. Then I'd go to the next bed. And that went on all afternoon. And I'd play from 3 o'clock in the afternoon till 10 o'clock at night when I'd catch the bus back. Following the trail of the hardy pioneer.
The Valley Echo had a question box. Every month the same question. What do I have to do to survive? Every month the answer. Rest. Lots of good food, fresh air, more rest. Chase the cure. Self-control. You had to be able to see cake, want cake, and go without cake. Only it was going without more than just cake. Being with friends, climbing hills, kissing your kids, or your girl. Is it true that TB germs are walled in and actually remain in the chest after a case has been arrested?
In arrested cases, the germs are walled in by fibrous tissue, which is very tough, the kind commonly seen in the scars which follow cuts or burns.
What do you consider the best method of getting results during the rest hour?
Lie perfectly still. Forget everything. Try to sleep. But if you cannot, try to be happy.
Is it harmful for a tuberculous person to play a wind instrument or to sing?
Yes.
Is it possible to have complete rest for the body when the mind is active?
No.
Is kissing permitted?
Kissing on the mouth is unhygienic and should be permanently given up.
After a while, a person needed to go out, have a little fun.
There were lots of romances and letters on strings up and down, and there were lots of romances.
Why not have a little romance? That was part of the cure. After all, if you couldn't live a normal life, that helped you.
On a June night, you're up there and you're looking over the lake, and you can see the cars at the Red Cross Lodge, and all the boys picking up the nurses. And there you are, stuck in a bed on the pavilion looking out. So I didn't blame them too much.
Sometimes we'd sneak out, go to the dances in Belcaris, Lipton. It was the nicest thing. The dancing. That's where I first met Jen. My first real girlfriend. She was a patient of the same too. We'd kind of seen each other out there like you could at night when the lights were on in the balconies. I waved. She waved back. I sent her a note. She sent me one too. And we met at the dance. Talk about a reason to win.
This one chappie slipped out and went down to dance in Fort Qu-Appelle. And Father had a marvelous grapevine. It was absolutely unbelievable. In about 15 minutes, somebody phoned him to say that this person was at the dance in Fort Qu-Appelle. And so Father just jumped in the car and drove downtown. And he went into the dance hall, and on the way in, he just stopped by this person and said, I'm going back in about 5 minutes. If you'd like to ride with me, you just go out and hop in the car. I'll be out in a few minutes. Then he went on up to the front and probably spoke to one of my sisters or something like that, to make the trip look legitimate and not at all to do with this other person. And so Father went up, talked to my sister, made his way out of the hall, got in the car, fellow was in there, talked all the way out to the sanatorium. Father delivered him to his pavilion and said good night. Nothing about the fact that he had been where he shouldn't have been. And that fellow never went to another dance.
Dr. Ferguson would have a talk with us. The nurses would give us heck. There'd be lectures printed in the Valley Echo. But it'd be worth it. A person had to live. Had to. It's only natural. August 11th, Sunday. We had a water fight, and our beds were soaked. August 14th. My roommate, Mr. Paulson, ran out of salt, and I tossed my shaker to him. It landed in his soup. August 17th. Frank got annoying, so we chased him outside. A real rule breaker for bed patients. August 20th. We raised heck this evening. Mac and I had a fight with rotten plums. September 23rd, Monday. Lottie, a Finn and 32, had a bad hemorrhage and is pretty sick. September 24th, Tuesday. Lottie died this morning. He had a nurse all the time. I won't see morning, he said to the doc. The doc said he didn't know. I'll bet you $10 I won't, said Lottie. He would have won, too. Some say his watch stopped when he died. So, rest, fresh air, and good food. Yes. And for some patients, pneumothorax. They injected air into your chest between the lung and the rib cage. Once enough air was pumped in, the lung would collapse. Then the lung could rest. Rest. Number one in the fight against tuberculosis. Rest the lung to concentrate all its energy on fighting TB, on walling in the TB germs with rings of calcium. Who knew how the air got out? But it did. And patients had to take pneumo 2 or 3 times a week for 2, 3, 5, and 10 years. Others had one of their lungs collapsed permanently by surgery called thoracoplasty.
The first time they went in, they, I think, removed 2 or 2.5 ribs, 2 possibly, and then waited 3 weeks, and you were given blood transfusions and everything to build you up. At the end of 3 weeks, you went back for your second one, and they would take out another 2 or 3 ribs, depending how much they wanted the lung to collapse. I had 3 stages. The third one came 3 weeks after the second. So in a period of 6 weeks, you had 3 major. The last one left you pretty weak. But anyway, so that the right side is completely collapsed. And as a result of taking the ribs out, they grow in instead of growing out the way ribs do. They grow in and they hold the lung down. And of course, while we were convalescing, they would put bags, little sandbags, to hold that down. You lay on your back, and that helped the healing, and it helped them grow in the way they wanted it to.
May 2nd, Friday. Annie had a hemorrhage this evening. She sure was frightened. She's only 3 rooms away from us on the balcony. June 15th, Sunday. Annie died. She screamed and raved. She knew she was dying, which made it worse. She was delirious part of the time. She died at 7:10 a.m. And they moved another woman in, and she died at 7 a.m. the following day. She moaned most all night. There's another in there now. July 12th, Saturday. A couple more cashed in their checks. Both hemorrhaged to death. Tough. Tough. They moved Meadows downstairs. He's getting worse. Frank was Métis, a free spirit if ever there was one. Because Mako had a hemorrhage. My roommate. First hemorrhage I ever saw. Meadows died Shorty and Tiny were two boys, younger than me. Shorty made it. Not Tiny, though. Strandberg died. Metro died. John Harbaugh. Mrs. Harbaugh came to be with him at the last. Behringer died. Nick died. Lottie died. Just like he said he would. Penfold made it. And Shello. Fenwick and Paulson, too. Joe, Jack, Grimson, Hirschmuller. Mostly all made it and were sent home. Quiescent, they called it, when the tuberculosis wasn't kicking up a storm inside your lungs. Up to you to sink or swim. The sand needed the beds for the others. Lots of others. Contini, Stewart, Campbell, Heno, and Pete. I don't know whether they're alive or dead.
Andrew Schrimmel, Wilmot. Rosalie Halorowicz, Melville. John Timbeck, Lemsford. Hugh Urquhart, Square Hill. Lillian Galloway, Lake Valley. Violet Helen Duff, Empress. Keith Haviland, Pinkham. Reginald Bowerman, Oxbow. Mrs. Florence Nelson.
It wouldn't be long
Regina.
before the telegraph signal would get going. Did you know that Joe went and that Bill is gone?
When I was a small boy, at that time there were about 40 patients a year dying at the sanatorium, and that was always. Some of these people were very good friends. We used to talk to them. They'd be up on the balcony upstairs, and you know we lived near the children's pavilion. And as we went back and forth, we'd get to know some of these people, and you talk to them, and they'd be so lonely, and they'd be up there watching the sun setting and wish they could run around like we were running around. It really hit hard when it was somebody that you knew.
The ones that did get better was their attitude. And everywhere I worked, I came that across. I'd say, good morning. It's a beautiful morning, open the drapes. What's good about it? So then they would get a little lecture. You know, it's a beautiful day, and you will get better. But if you remain a sourpuss, you will stay there. If you remain a sourpuss, now don't do that. It's a beautiful morning, so good morning. They'd say, good morning, nurse. There we are. Because I was always cheerful. I loved what I was doing.
There were amateur hours on the radio to raise money for the Saskatchewan Anti-Tuberculosis League. The local radio station would set up in the town hall. Sometimes we'd have a radio show broadcast from the sand here, and Alf and Stiffy would sing. Us patients too, some of us, with the doctor's permission. But mostly the amateur hours were out there all over the province. Everybody did their bit for the sand. Everybody wanted to give Mr. TB the boot.
The amateur hour was truly an amateur show because the people that took part were the people from the community. Now this was little Johnny giving a recitation, little Mary playing her violin, Susie singing, a little group dancing, each of them bringing their talents to the program. Once the program was underway, the people in the hall would put up $1, $2, $5 to have little Mary play the violin again, little Johnny to give the poem again. There were the phone calls coming in over the local line, and people would phone in from their farm homes and from wherever their grandparents lived or others, and they'd say, well, I'll give you $2 if somebody will do this again, and I'll give you $5 for that, and I'll give you $10 if Gilby will stand on his head, and I'll do this and I'll do that. And so we began to raise a fair amount of money. It was a 7-day-a-week activity because of the responsibility which we'd taken on for the Saskatchewan Anti-Tuberculosis League. Thankfully, the Associated Canadian Travelers individually and wholeheartedly supported it, and mainly buying the equipment. We bought big vans, 18-wheelers you'd call them, I think, today. These were all equipped with X-ray units, diagnostic
what they did there was to go out and examine and X-ray people looking for tuberculosis. And up to that time, people would come in when they got sick. The mass survey idea was to go out and go through the population and find them before the tuberculosis got far enough advanced so that they would break down and be sick. So you get those people in early, and you maybe 6 months, maybe a year, they were all cured and back home. So that was one of the first.
I had been working at a magnificent sum of $25 a month in those days, which was not very good, really. But and my mother was a widow with 3 children, and I had started work early because of this. If there hadn't been free treatment, I'd be dead, because there was no way that I would have been able to pay, say, even $1 a day for hospital treatment.
Free treatment was another first, and that was came in 1929, and that was so significant because initially people would go to the sanatorium, and they didn't have any money. Then they'd have to go back home again. Then probably infect somebody else in the family, and then 2 of them would go back. So when the treatment became free, then people who were sick could afford to go into the sanatorium and get better. And that was a very significant thing.
Dr. Ferguson, along with the Saskatchewan Anti-TB League, put together a plan which made Saskatchewan a world leader in the fight against TB. The modern X-ray was invented by Bob Connell at Fort San. He used his movie camera and ordinary film to make the X-ray small and portable so the whole province could be X-rayed. In true Saskatchewan spirit, schools, whole towns, and even whole cities had health surveys, the first in the world. Saskatchewan pioneered free treatment for TB patients in 1929, years before other Canadian provinces. And the BCG vaccine was pioneered here too. Saskatchewan's Indian research study was unique in the world and essential to the survival of the native people of Saskatchewan. In addition to building the Children's Pavilion and the Preventorium, Saskatchewan's IODE started the Every Woman's Fund for women and children with TB in the days before free treatment. Long work hours and stuffy, dirty workplaces spread TB. People all over the province helped to make working conditions more healthy. Something about Fort San inspired people to do their best. They weren't there for the money. There was little enough of that. It was dedication, from Dr. Ferguson on down. Staff dedication, volunteer dedication in the Anti-TB League. People like Mr. R.D. Roberts, who charmed donations to the Christmas Seal Fund, even during the Depression. It was a time of tremendous energy, focused on a common goal: the prevention and eradication of tuberculosis. The public and the medical profession learned together as new discoveries were made. Each person gave something. That's how we really beat TB. The miracle of antibiotics came after World War II, but by then, we had made our own little miracle happen.
Working for the cause, not for the salary. And that everybody, you did everything you could for the patients. And this was very evident. It was, in my estimation, it was a very happy place.
The story about the sanatorium is a very important story of this province. It's, over the years, every family was touched in some way by the sanatorium. Either people had some relative in the san, or they had somebody there that worked at the sanatorium. While the province had 1 million people in it, everybody was influenced and touched by the tuberculosis epidemic that we had. And everybody was responsible in some way for the in the success that was achieved in controlling tuberculosis.
Rest was the only cure. It was hard for me when I was 17. Hard for a man with a family to support. Hard for a mother worried about her children. I'd hear an aeroplane and run to the window to see the pelicans flying across Echo Lake. And I'd wish I could fly with them. Had to rest. If I was ever going to have any of the things I wanted, I had to rest now. I had to learn. What I wanted to do wasn't always what I should do. I had to fight myself every bit as much as the TB.
Mind over matter. That's what Fort San taught. A healthy spirit heals the body.
Those persons who were convinced that they were going to die invariably did.
I don't know that I thought a lot about how sick I was. But the fact that they put me to bed and I had to stay made me realize that I had a long road to hoe. And I was just bound and determined that I was going to do it, if that's what you call mind over matter. And as I said, I probably shed a few tears and I said a few prayers. And I don't know, it just got through it. But I definitely think if you are determined enough that you can lick just about anything.
In this beautiful setting, with these great people, I realized I had more than my own will to live to draw on. Every day, people showed me that you don't just live for yourself, you live for others too. The nurses wanted me to live, Alf and Stiffy and Dr. Ferguson, they all did. I never had such good friends. I never had any closer family than I had at Fort San. Fort San. I'll never forget Fort San. I wonder if people will remember what it used to be like.